Welcome to the Rise with Diana podcast. We're so excited because you all have been joining us on the weekly. We have been a little lax, but we're going to continue to rise up because we have the most amazing guest on here today. And I have known this beautiful icon in our community, and we've been so blessed that she has now joined the Rise with Diana movement, the Rise with Diana Rise with Advocates movement, the Rise with Diana Nation. Whoop,
All
whoop.
right,
So
let's go.
here we have, let's go, baby. We have Dr. Carla Janelle Pattin. No relation, but we're all related. And I'm so excited because what I want you all to hear is this amazing story. So listen up. If you are driving in your car, say do a little beep beep. If you're flipping an egg, flip it ever extra fancy because we got Dr. Carla here. Dr. Pattin, thank you so much for being here. And we're so excited to have you share what we'd love for you to share a little bit about your background. And we always like to ask, what brings you joy?
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Diana, for inviting me for this fantastic, phenomenal platform. Um, I have been watching you, Diana, for some time, and I've always loved your spirit. And I remember
Mm.
seeing you at Toll House, and it has always been in the back of my mind to become a part of the movement. But I always just felt like it just was never the right time. Like I was always on the 10-year
Right.
track, I just had my baby. Like it was just always something. And I saw you at
Mhm.
Toll House, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is a sign. And I said, I am ready to rise. I am ready to
Yes.
rise.
Yes.
I had
Yes.
no
So,
idea though that the rising would be what it was. So I'm
yes.
excited to talk about that.
Well, let's just go ahead and honor that you've already risen to a level. And so tell the listeners a little bit about your background. You said tenure track, you said pregnant. So tell us a little bit about that. Just kind of put us in your story a little bit there.
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I have a gardening company called The Harvest Doctor. I learned gardening from my great grandmother. She is currently still alive. She is 105 years old. She was the first Black and
Wow.
Indigenous woman to, I wasn't really into gardening like that, but I always saw her grow herbs and collard greens and Kentucky Wonders. That was her
Wow.
thing. So I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. I graduated from Central Catholic in 2003. I got all of my degrees here. I was one of those people that was too afraid to travel, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
How I went from being too afraid to travel to like going on solo trips.
Yeah.
So graduated. My mother was always a master landscaper. I still to this day I tell her like
Mm.
you really need to start a landscaping company. And you know what? I might just go ahead and do it. And then just run
Mm.
it under her name. I don't know. But she is a
Mhm.
phenomenal landscaper. And I noticed
Mhm.
how even in high school, especially, I would pay more attention to her. And it was almost like she was working out her soul salvation in nature.
Mm.
And my parents were
Wow.
divorced, and that was just how she was able to cope with whatever that was going on in her mind.
Mhm.
And it was her version of freedom. And I would always
Mm.
be in the house looking at her in the back window, watching my brother. So again, never was into gardening. Actually, I was like really like, I don't want to get dirty. I was one of those. Don't want to get
Yeah.
dirty. It's too hot. My feet are dirty. Oh my goodness. Like, I can't tolerate this. I was very
Mhm.
much like that. It wasn't until I was in college and I read a book by Alice Walker called In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. So there's an essay
Wow.
called Looking for Zora, which I love, and obviously the
Mm.
essay In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. And it was everything that I
Mm.
needed in my soul at the time. I was a PhD student. And I was just captivated with the essay because it talked a lot about, well, she talks a lot about how Black women, especially when they're growing up in the South, um, and this is like post-slavery, and how Black women were not really allowed, or they were shunned. Their intellectual prowessness was shunned, right? Um,
Mhm.
and we know that there are so many Black feminist movements in particular, many of whom started like through the Black club women's movement, right? And oftentimes
Mhm.
it was much more bigger. The Black women's movements were so much more bigger than like the mainstream feminist movement. So, I mean, obviously they
Mhm.
pushed back, right?
Mhm.
But she talked about how Black women's intellectual capabilities and brilliance and genius was found in nature. And they would use their
Mhm.
creativity, they would recycle materials, they would do
Mhm.
all these different things. And she talked about how her grandmother and just women that she knows, how they would put certain colors together and they were intercropping, and people would
Mhm.
come by the neighborhood and be like, oh my God, that's so nice. And there might have been like a hole in the wall, and then they would stick a little flower, or the woman that she was referring
Mhm.
to would stick a little flower. And it was just like these just brilliant moments, right? And how
Mm.
Black women are actually at the forefront of all of the environmentalist movements, right?
Wow.
And it really hit me because obviously, I thought about, my life, and I thought about my
Mhm.
mother and my great grandmother, how there's so much brilliance that is pent up on the
Mm.
inside of us that is screaming
Mhm.
to come out. And Diana,
Okay.
your program does this. You show us
Ah.
how to release that pent up brilliance, and the world tells
Mm.
us that we can't, exercise it because we're too extra.
Yeah.
We do too much. I've
Right.
always been accused of that, right? But
Yeah.
nature was a way to do that. So, and I
Mm.
said, oh, I want to start gardening. This is a thing.
Yeah.
So I wrote my comps, my dissertation comps on Black women's intellectual brilliance in the classroom. And I compared
Mhm.
it to the process of gardening. Now, mind you, I've never grown
Mhm.
a garden. So when
Mhm.
I first moved into my first house, there was a garden plot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have to garden. This is it. So I began to garden. I fell absolutely in love with it. In 2020, I started my gardening company called The Harvest Doctor. So a lot of people, they know me as the Harvest Doctor. Now I have 12,000 followers. Kind of hard to believe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I believe it.
yeah, because I was at 1,000 for a very long time. And we can definitely talk
Mhm.
about that. So the pandemic hit the United States maybe like around the end of February, early March. We all know what happened. I remember
Yeah.
seeing Amy Acton on the news, and she says, "Get out and garden," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I should just do it," because I had
Mm.
already had my LLC. My business exploded. I built 20 raised garden beds in 1 year. I had to
Wow.
learn carpentry in like 24 hours, 72 hours. In the beginning, the beds were breaking, but people kept buying them. They weren't leveled.
Wow.
So much I had to learn. But now I can confidently say that I am a carpenter. I'm not.
Yes.
Yes, right? I'm a carpenter,
Yes.
and I don't do the carvings or anything like that. So as of to this date, it's 2025. I have built close to 60 gardens, and all
Wow.
around the city of Toledo and in Buffalo. So that's what I do. I teach gardening. I truly, truly believe in food sovereignty. And I have a
Mm.
unique way in which I had like kind of an awakening about food sovereignty
Mm.
and the way in which I like to
Mm.
contribute in that space. So if you want to talk more about food
Mhm.
sovereignty,
Yeah, first of all, did y'all just hear what she just said? Like, I am so loving what you are all about and what you stand for. I feel being with you is like, I need to know more. I just wrote down a whole bunch of questions. The first thing I had was, What's a Kentucky Wonder? Were you guys wondering that as well? When you first started talking, you said a Kentucky Wonder. What is a Kentucky Wonder? Is that a certain flower?
It is a green bean. It's not a bush bean. It's one of the beans that climb. I can't think of the actual proper name,
Oh, okay.
but it's
I
a
was stuck
green
at
bean.
that. And
And
and you what?
I love growing Kentucky Wonders, and I can see why my grandmama loves Kentucky Wonders because you can literally build a green wall. I mean, they get up to like,
Wow.
what, 15 feet, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Carla, you literally are like a star. You've become this understanding, your place in the universe. Was there something deep within you that knew what I would say I always ask people, like, what did you know your superpower was when you were younger? Like, what did you feel in your heart? You saw your mom doing these things and she was working out her soul. Like, that's profound that you saw her doing this and you recognized this while you were watching your brother. It's almost as if you were taking this solar system and putting it together and realizing your place in it. Did you know that that's what you were doing, or how did you was this a part of your superpower? Like, tell us a little bit about that background.
You know, I did not know that it was my superpower. I know
Mhm.
that I have always been a feminist, right? I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
even since I was like a little girl, and I've always
Mhm.
believed in I've always been drawn to like the history of Black women, and I know that I've
Mhm.
always wanted to be a part of that.
Mhm.
At that point, I really didn't know where I fit into this space where I can actually do the work. And that's what I
Mhm.
saw my mom do. I saw my mom actually do the work. So, as a
Mhm.
little girl, like I would always just kind of like look at the stars and then just kind of like wonder, like, who am I supposed to be? And I was literally like my daughter's age. And I'm now
Mhm.
trying to train my daughter to lay back, look up in the sky, in the stars.
And how old is your daughter?
She is 7.
She's 7.
Yes.
Mhm.
And to just dream. I always
Mhm.
had something in me where I wanted to be different and I wanted to make a unique contribution. So
Mhm.
being that I was just so drawn to Black women's history, I knew that I wanted to be a part of
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And I just believe that watching my mother, watching my grandmother be creative with all these dishes from her garden, and my
Mhm.
mom, divorced, single parent,
Mhm.
raising 2 children, you know,
Mhm.
and I'm sure at that time, and she would even say, like, I had no idea what I was doing. She was
Mhm.
working it out. And I found myself like in a very similar situation once I, became an adult, finding a way to work it out, right?
Right.
Having a
Yes.
release.
Mhm.
So I'm very happy to say that I found my place, and the Harvest Doctor um is really built on like a Black feminist mindset. Um,
Yes.
and it's not like overt a lot of times.
Mhm.
I want to be more intentional though. Even
Yeah.
with the way that I like to offer like the food sovereignty piece of it, easy
Yeah.
gardens that are about
Mhm.
2 feet tall. Um,
Mhm.
Integrating, texture plants, which is basically succulents and herbs and,
Mhm.
pollinators, right? And mixing
Mhm.
all of that together and just really eliminating the barriers to gardening. And that's essentially why
Mhm.
I'm here, eliminating all the language that intimidates people and just bringing Black women in. And majority of the people that I serve are Black women, bringing them
Mhm.
into this space and saying like, not only do you belong, but if you look
Mhm.
at Black botanical history, like we've been bringing plants over to Turtle Island, okay, which
Mhm.
some people say the New World or the USA, but it's Turtle Island. We've been bringing food over. I mean, like beings
And
and
what is can you
lettuce.
explain to give people Turtle Island?
Okay,
Explain
yes.
that.
So Turtle Island is basically what we know now as the United States, but it was called Turtle
Mm,
Island by the indigenous native people that were here long before Christopher Columbus. They had thriving civilizations, um, thriving systems of living and being. They had a thriving spirituality, so they
mhm.
were, civilizations that were advanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple things here. This is like a master class. I feel like you talking about food sovereignty makes me feel like I should be waving a flag somewhere. But I love the idea of sovereignty and food sovereignty, but I also love the idea that you took this idea that you had and you put it into your thesis. And by the way, I read her thesis, and the way you threaded everything together, you said I wasn't sure what I was doing. I was just kind of putting it together, and you weren't sure where to take it next, but I see it. And so I see an opportunity because of your history and understanding Black women and helping us for such a time as this. There's such a liberation with your messaging, especially getting in the soil through all of this. And by the way, y'all, let's all vote for her to go ahead and make this public, this thesis. But what do you see now, like as you look upon your thesis and what you've just told us, and the work that you're doing as the harvest actor? How do you see them folding together?
Yeah, I am still working that out. Thanks to you and the Academy,
Mm,
I am now
yeah.
brave to open it. But the
Yes.
working out the soul salvation, I am
Hmm.
continuing to do that. I do that in the soul.
Hmm.
I try to teach others to do that, but also the dissertation on Black women and how they define the American dream for themselves. And that in
Hmm.
itself was working out kind of my soul, if you will, and today. So the connection is when I asked my participants what they thought about the American dream, how would they define it? And obviously, they would say, a house, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, right? And it would include a yard, right?
Hmm.
So part of, the liberatory aspect and the sovereignty aspect is I am creating places and spaces for Black women to dream again,
Mm.
to unplug from, and as you know, Diana, the corporate,
Yes,
we
yes,
talk
our
about
corporate,
um,
we call it
conveyor
the
belt.
conveyor. Y'all, we've been talking about this thing called a conveyor belt where people start to come. It's like being in the matrix and you start to kind of like follow this certain program and then you're on the conveyor belt. That's powerful. And if y'all know what I'm talking about, put it in the comments. I know what you're talking about, but go ahead.
So the garden, I think, is definitely a place where women can at least take a break from the conveyor belt, or they
Yes.
can consider
Yeah.
maybe I don't want to be on the conveyor belt anymore because that's what gardening did for me. It helped
Yes.
me just being out there and being in tune with nature and looking at
Right.
the way plants grow and how some grow in the center and how you have to let
Hmm.
go and just how some plants they grow all the way tall to the sky, but some need support, right? I
Yeah.
think just gardening is just a roadmap to get you to your version of your dream. Because
Mhm.
obviously, coming out from the data, the American dream isn't working for Black women.
For sure.
There are a lot of
Yes.
problems with it. The participants
Mhm.
they believed that the American dream was only for the men in their families. And then
Mhm.
oftentimes the men in their families, they were prioritized more than they were. They
Mhm.
believed that the American dream meant that, when they participate in their classes, they don't get called on, right?
Mm.
So when I talk about like, okay, like how do you feel the dream, interacts or or how do you manage it? How do you navigate it? How do you resist it in the classroom? They come with like some very, very interesting stories. So my part in that, the future would be to, well, publish the book. Just go
Yes.
ahead and do
Yeah.
it.
Just
Um,
go on and do it.
I do want to infuse more of like a gardening aspect to it, because there's so many
Mhm.
parallels between dreaming and the way in which plants grow in a garden, right? Um,
Wow.
I'm sure plants, I mean, I don't want to go too far deep, but I mean, plants, they have a goal, and their goal is
Yes.
to thrive, no matter what.
Mhm.
And they are going to thrive, despite
Mhm.
whatever barriers, are presented to them. So, but I think the Rise Academy allows you to
Mhm.
dream and to grow like a plant,
Yes.
regardless of the
Yes.
barriers. But then, we have to eliminate those barriers too. I mean,
Right.
just because we're resilient doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, like we have to just endure this. No, eliminate.
Yes.
That's why we have gardens.
That's
So,
that's right.
yeah.
That's why we have you, and that's why we have me helping and doing. I feel you're doing your greatest work. I feel this calling that has is really continuing to crack open inside of you. So you came to the Rise Advocates Academy. What were you feeling before? You said, I want to do it, I want to do it. But what was it that drew you in to the academy?
Ugh. So I originally wanted to join the academy because I wanted to have more confidence in the shift that was taking place in my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm currently at the University at Buffalo SUNY.
Mhm.
However, I live in Toledo. So I'm at
Mhm.
Buffalo maybe like 3 times a month. And especially
Mhm.
with my fall schedule is looking really good. So I really wanted to learn how to negotiate for myself and to
Mhm.
advocate for myself to be a better person on the conveyor belt.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
But I'm trying to get off.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm just about off, right? So that was kind of that was one of the reasons why. And I wanted to just step more into my purpose in regards to gardening. I was very achievement oriented. Um,
Mhm.
and sometimes, focusing so much so on achievement, it's like we're so focused on just climbing the ladder, but it's like, what does your mind, your will, and your emotions say about all this?
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
sometimes your mind and your will and your emotions are not in alignment with, going up the conveyor belt or
Right.
going up for achievement. And it's something in my soul was just like, I don't want to do another action plan.
Mm.
I want to do another degree. I
Mhm.
don't want to get another certificate. Like, I
Mhm.
knew that that just wasn't it. But even though
Mhm.
that's what the world would say that I would,
Yes.
and
Yes.
also coming out of DEI, right?
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
work is, I mean, it's dead centered, right? And
Right.
even in the DEI space, because I am a Black feminist, and that's the theoretical framework that I use, there's already contention in there.
Right. A lot of
So
tension.
a lot of
Yeah.
tension.
Yeah.
So those were my goals. They were very achievement.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
however, as I began to grow in the program, I saw that like this whole achievement thing, it's just not where it's at. It's like what does my soul need? My mind,
Yeah.
my will, and my emotions. That
Mhm.
is what is that needs to be worked on. And that is what is going to drive me, as opposed to all these external, egotistical, look at me and my degree, look at me and my resume.
Mhm.
It's like, what does your
Yeah.
mind, your will, and your emotions say? And that
Right.
is what I got out of it.
Yeah, so we are again, when you as in the Rise with Diana community, you're hearing her say, she is definitely a rise advocate because these are high achieving, high successful, very papered up women. We got the degrees, we've got the receipts, we've done the thing. Why am I not fulfilled? Right. And so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the conveyor belt. The conveyor belt says dismiss the soul, dismiss God, dismiss your internal knowing, the Holy Spirit that rests inside of you that's trying to talk to you. And that is what you say, right? We say get off that conveyor belt, right? It's not that you can't have success, but have success according alignment with your soul. So going through the academy, what are you now feeling? What's shifted in you? What benefits have you seen now gone through it?
There are so many benefits,
Mhm.
so many possibilities outside of just working to get promoted. Um,
Mm.
I let go of a lot of things that I needed to let go. I mean, because the thing of it is, even if you choose to be on the conveyor belt, if you don't look at what is really happening in your soul, and like you said, well, the plan that God wants, the issues are still going to be there.
Right, right.
And,
Yeah.
and in many ways, they're going to be magnified because for me, the shift was I made God's promises an idol. God promised
Mm.
me that He's going to take care of me and I'm going to be promoted and I'm going to be, but sometimes you could be so like, God's going to do this, God's going to do this, and you don't surrender and let
Right.
God do it because you're so much so trying to like, let me get this together. Let me do. And the biggest lesson I learned is to surrender. And that
Mm.
to me is worth more weight than anything that I can put. What got me the identity gap. And
Mhm.
I know that is the research of, and I can't remember the
Dr. Joe Dispenza. I always like to give him props. Dr. Joe Dispenza.
The identity gap is what really got me because, and I'll say why. Because for the most part, like who I am outdoors, outside, and in
Mhm.
the public,
Right.
pretty much like that in private. I'm sure there's like some variations. Like maybe there's maybe like a 25, maybe 30% difference. Like if I had
Yeah.
to, you know.
Yeah.
I knew that I could not really rise to the level that God has called me because this is
Mhm.
a huge mantle to build
Mhm.
community gardens
Mhm.
and to work with my hands, right? And I knew that in order for me to really fly, there were certain things that had to shift, right?
Mhm.
So I was stuck on module three.
Yes. Yes.
2 weeks or so
Right.
because I knew that I had to be brave and
Mhm.
and I love me more, right?
Mhm.
I love me
Mhm.
more.
Mhm.
And I realized that, I might not be setting a good example for my daughter, uh,
Mm.
and she's watching, right?
Mhm.
And I knew that speaking of the values, I made a whole list of values because I asked you, I'm like, what kind of values? I mean, I'm in the middle of shifting my values. What are they? So
Mm.
I made a list of them. And I just didn't want to be a fraud. I really
Mhm.
wanted to stand up for my values and what
Mhm.
I believe. And, I cannot live, one way, and like what you say, what I agree with and I think of all the time is like, what's the whole point if your daughter hates you behind closed doors?
Right.
But you're big and powerful outside. And I really wanted to demonstrate the values that I preach through gardening
Yes.
outside in my own personal life.
Yes. Yes.
And so I just felt like the integrity piece is just so critical for me. It's so
Right.
critical.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to stand up for my values and stand
Mhm.
for what I believe in, right?
Mhm.
And that I would say was the biggest thing that I got out of it is to be brave, to stand
Mm.
up for what I
Yeah.
believe in. And
Right.
I believe, and yes, just yesterday you said something so profound. And I just had like this aha moment. Like, I remember being in Lowe's and Home Depot around November 2019. And I remember being in a lumber department so scared. And I
Mhm.
knew that God had called me to start building these beds. And I was
Yeah.
like almost in tears, like, how am I going to do this? I couldn't handle the noise, the clanking of the lumber. It was too much. The contractors coming in and out, everybody seems like they know what they're doing. And I'm just like, oh, like, oh.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now I come in there confident. Like, let me get
Mhm.
that. I
Mhm.
need those screws, that. But like, just like you said yesterday, at our dinner at my graduation ceremony,
Yes.
said that you make little itty bitty choices and then eventually the staircase will appear.
Yes. Isn't that so
That got
profound?
me. And
Yes.
I know that if I
Mm.
stand up for my values, and I know that God does not mean for anyone to live like this, right?
Yes.
I know that just like before the harvest doctor was born,
Mm.
and just like the staircase appeared, I know that the staircase is on its way.
Amen. Amen. And what a beautiful example of a mom you are to your daughters. Wouldn't you all agree? And I feel like the whole Rise with Diana podcast land, the 100,000 women are already that we can't see right now, they're clapping for you. The angels are cheering for you. God is saying you are being a good and faithful servant by honoring the soul that's within you. And so, this has been such a profound I feel like we're only scratching the surface of you. But what I want to hear from you is, every time I know this podcast, like I wrote my book, I wrote the book and I do this podcast for that woman who's just really struggling. She's in the middle of a storm and she doesn't know that she can make it. Oftentimes, I feel like it's me when I was at this job and I was crying because I should have been happy at this new job and I was making more money but I was so sad that I didn't think I could even walk into those front doors. What would you tell that woman right now? Let's think about her. She's in this position, she's listening to you, and she's like, she can do that, but I can't. What would be a thing if you were talking to her right now? What would you tell her?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say too is like, if your friend was going through this, what would you tell her? So you have to be
Mm,
careful how you talk to yourself.
mm,
The second thing is like, I'm learning that you don't have to have a plan. Like, it's totally
mm.
okay. And I know that that is the complete
So good.
opposite
Yes.
of what us educated, like you say, papered up women will tell you.
Right.
Um, spending time alone, God will give you
Mm,
downloads. Like,
yes.
these divine downloads that I've been getting have been crazy. And it's things that you think that are impossible, and then you start working on them. So I recently, because I am a woman in the middle of a storm, I would say I'm more so in the eye of the storm because the peace that I'm feeling is just absolutely just profound. It's a peace beyond
Mm,
understanding. I started writing out the dreams, my wildest dreams, which I've learned from the academy. And God said, okay, go through the list and start working on the ones you can achieve now, right? The
mm,
low-hanging fruit, right? So
mm,
start putting these
mm,
things in motion. But I would definitely say that all things happen for a reason.
mm.
I think a setback, the way I've experienced setbacks have always been a setup
Yes.
or something that you can't even imagine. And I am
Mm,
anticipating something that hasn't even came across my mind.
mhm,
And oftentimes we go through these things to build up our muscle, right? We
mhm.
need to build up our muscle. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's things that we have to work within us that God wants to get us to pay attention to. Like, for instance, for me, like Carla, you have to be more organized. So
Mm.
oftentimes these things, these crises will happen to you so that you can get organized.
Yes.
Maybe you have to raise your voice a little bit more and speak your
Mm.
truth because you know what? God may have a six-figure job waiting for you, and
Right.
you have to learn how to speak up.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
or the job is going to crush you. So you cannot ask God for all these blessings and make it an idol if you don't go through the process. But the problem
Yeah.
is that we don't want God's process. We want
Mm.
our process.
Mm.
But if you learn to surrender, and I have like a surrender prayer that I keep in my pocket, and I say it several times a day, Lord, I surrender blank. I don't
Yes.
know how to surrender, but teach me how to surrender my emotions, right?
I love that.
Also, just like what we go through in the academy, I would say go through the academy.
There you go. Solution. It's solved.
Just go through the academy. But you can also, so I oftentimes replace the negative thoughts with the positive ones. So something would come in my mind and say, well, they just want me to fail anyway. And I'll say, nope, God has blessed me with a beautiful future, and I am very excited to see what I have in store, what He
I
has,
love this. I
right? Or
love
what
it.
God has,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So just kind of like recognizing those thoughts and then replacing it. And it's not
I love
easy, but it gets better over time. But I would definitely say the storm is to clear the way for something amazing.
That's beautiful.
And hang
Yes.
there. And I hate to say, like, enjoy the storm. I know that
Yeah.
sounds a little backwards,
Hmm.
but just know that God is preparing you for something so great that you can't even perceive it.
Wow. This has been so good because in reality, we are supposed to count it all joy when trials come. So you are a beautiful blessing, Carla. And I'm so grateful that you were on the Rise or Die in a podcast before we leave. And I know there's more because I think I need to have you back. But before you leave, can you tell them where they can follow you?
Please follow me on Instagram. I
Yeah.
I am very active on Instagram. So at the Harvest Doctor, you could definitely find me. I am giving daily tips on how
Yes.
to grow your own food, different problems you may have. I also another reason why you should follow me on Instagram is because I give a lot of free resources away. I give away
Yes.
a list of ebooks. I give away planting plans. So if you don't know how to start your garden, and that's what people say, I want a garden, but I don't know how to start. I
Yes.
show you how to do that from start to finish. Also, if you want to make money from gardening, you can definitely DM me and I can definitely send you some of my programs that I have. If you want to grow on social media and you are a plant lover, I can definitely show you how to do that. I have programs.
Yeah.
So, yes.
The truth that is harvesting from the doctor, Dr. Carla Janelle Pattin. Thank you so much, my beautiful friend.
Thank
You're
you.
amazing. And I'm so grateful for you. Y'all, listen to this, listen to it again. And if you have someone that you know needs hope, give them this podcast. And so, as we do, we're so grateful that you're here. Please like and subscribe, share this with your family, share it with your friends, and we will see you next time on the Rise with Diana podcast.